Alright, someone asked me how to make a mask like this, so I'm making a video about it. Let's try to do it faster than the other one. So I'm using the what's it called? Face mask and beanie. Color it black and add a half circle. I'm sure you know the controls. L2, R2 to rotate, L1, R1 to scale. So just position it where you want the eye to be. Try to make sure it doesn't go over the edge of the mask. And mirror it. And it looks like they're too spaced apart. I'm just trying to move it a little bit in. Mirror it again. That looks better. So stamp it and position it and rotate it so you got a mouth. I'm going to use a darkish reddish desaturated color. Scale it pretty big because you want it to be cartoonish. Then, alright, I guess we'll work on the eyes first. Add a circle for the pupil, and I want my eyes to be blue, so I'm going to color the outermost circle pretty dark blue. Scale and position it, and I'm gonna want them pretty big, so they're actually gonna go outside the edge, but we'll fix that. So stamp and scale, stamp again, change the color to the iris black. Excuse me. Stamp again, make it white and reduce the opacity to make a reflection. Below the pupil and above the iris, I'm gonna add one of these flower looking things and reduce the opacity a lot, and then you'll have some nice details there. You can also add a shadow, add a gradient, and just make the color slightly different. You can even make it more purplish or greenish to make it have a more interesting color. And just turn the opacity way down so it's just barely showing. So obviously we want to hide the part of the eye that's sticking out, so what you can either do is add a square, or if you want them to look even happier, a half circle. You could probably use a circle too. Color that black, scale it on one axis, and now it looks really happy. You just gotta fidget with it a bit because it's at the edge of the mask, so it's gonna wanna jump around if you move it too much. That's a happy looking dude. Now I don't think it looks good when the eye is touching or when the pupil is touching the edge. So I'm just gonna delete this, move it up a bit, scale it down, and just stamp it again, because that's a lot easier to make it perfectly aligned in the center. just adjust the other shapes to fit. Make sure the pupil is above those other effects, so it's black. That looks okay. Bit smaller. Then I'm just gonna mirror all these shapes. Except the reflection needs to be on the same side. So I'm gonna move that over. And if you want to make it look a little bit more interesting, you can change the color of one of the eyes. Just make the outermost pretty dark, the innermost pretty light and saturated. And for the gradient, you can even make it a different color that complements it. So for green, you can go yellow, and I think that looks pretty decent. It's a very subtle effect. Then to make the eyes look more three-dimensional, you can use this one. It's like an inverted gradient. And this is obviously why it's good to just have the whole mask black, because it's hard to blend it with the background. So turn it black. Try to position it appropriately. Reduce the opacity a bit. And mirror. So I also added bloodshot eyes. I think those need to go below this gradient. In order to get that effect, I use these squiggly arrows down here. Make the color red. Reduce the opacity quite a bit, maybe not that much. Scale it and rotate it, put it on the edge, and you're gonna wanna not reuse too many of these. There are a few, so since it's organic shapes, it's too obvious if you repeat them too much. So I'm just adding like 3 or 4 for each eye. Scaling them, putting them on the edge with the thicker part pointing towards the edge. And just keep doing that until you're happy with it. Shouldn't spend too much time on this. I already recorded one version. Felt like it was a bit too slow. Almost done. Did I use all of them now? You know, the more time you spend on just fine-tuning, the better it'll look. But try not to waste yours. So if you want to make them look even more bloodshot, you can just change the color of the whole eye to be a bit more reddish, just very subtly. Then what you also can do is add a gradient on top of it. It's white. Just a very subtle effect. And you're gonna wanna pay attention to the layer order. Keep it below the rest of the pupils. Then what you also can do to make it look even more goofy is just reduce or increase the size of one of the pupils. And you can even, you know, scale down the whole thing. And to make it even more wacky, just make it look in a completely different direction. But as I said, it's pretty hard to align perfectly centered circles on top of each other. So if it doesn't look good, just delete them and duplicate on top of them. Hey, look at that. This guy doesn't know where he is. That does look like shit though, because I just positioned those what are these called? Blood something. Blood vessels? Anyways, I said I wasn't gonna do this. I just can't help myself, you know. I want to look at. Can't even find the shapes. Alright. Let's do the mouth. So just duplicate the mouth. Turn it. I want to say white, but you should actually make it like a light gray. Because then later when you add the shadow effects, it's gonna look better. You're gonna have more contrast. So you got the bottom row of teeth. For the top row, you can just use a square. Like that. If you want to give them buck teeth, you got this rounded square right here. Now there's a problem with this, with the shading in this game. As you can see, the outlines are always dark, but it's not gonna look that bad once you start adding some shading. So first I'm gonna add a square linear gradient like this. Make it black, reduce the opacity, and scale it down so it's pretty narrow. Put it like that. For the bottom one, you can use this half circle gradient. Make it black, turn down the opacity, or I guess it's called transparency here. And for the shadow and highlights, there are a few things you can do. So I'm actually using these streaks. You got this one, which is pretty triangular, and This one is also pretty good, just for a straight line. That's kind of blurry. Make it black, turn down the opacity, rotate in position. Let's give their teeth some shadows. And then the further out to the side you get, you want to make the gaps even smaller. And just be mindful of the positioning of the shadows so that they give the illusion that the light is coming from one side. I'm just stamping them across and then turning them white and going over it again. Now here's where I should have just made the, where is it? Just made the teeth not completely white. It makes it easier for the shadow effect or the highlight effect to work. Now you can see it. So if the light is coming from the left, you want the highlight to be on the left side of the teeth. Now I'm just scaling them down a bit. Making them a bit wider can also help. Reducing the opacity. And if you want an even more pronounced effect, you can use this more triangular shape. And just scale it way down. His teeth aren't really that straight, so you get these curved effects, and this will work to make them look even more three-dimensional. Just play around with trying to position them, see where it kind of makes sense. And turning it over, like, this looks weird, this looks better. And then for the bottom row, it would be the opposite. Stamp them over a few times. Change the color to black. And rotate it. Do it again. You can get some really creepy looking teeth. Might also want to add some highlights on the top so you can see the shape. And as you can see, I'm just going to the shapes I placed already and stamping them instead of having to add all over again. I shouldn't be spending too much time on making it look good. It's just about knowing the technique. So we're gonna need to add a tongue, and for that I'm using 2 half circles because it's kind of an uneven shape, so the bottom should be more long, sticking out like this, and the top should be flatter. That. Make it reddish, but not too dark or too saturated. Then add a radial gradient, turn it black, scale it down and position it on one side where you want the shadow to be. Reduce the opacity a bit, stamp it, put it on the other side, and make it white so it's a highlight. Stamp it, and you can put an even more subtle one in the center. And should have one at the top. Actually, for this I could use this half circle gradient. Like that, maybe. What else? I guess the drool. You got this eye drop, what? Water drop. Just make it very light blue, like almost white, but not quite. So I had one drop dripping from the teeth and one from the tongue. Now obviously his tongue is all the way down on his chin, so I'm just using a forced perspective optical illusion. I put it on his neck and just try to position it so that it looks like it's coming from his tongue. I'm gonna add a highlight to the drop, and for that you have a gradient that's shaped exactly like a drop. Scale it down so it's thinner and put it on one side. It's hard to see. I mean, this is pretty subtle. You're not really going to be able to notice this from a distance. But I like doing it. Could just make them a bit more exaggerated. And then you want the bit where the drop is falling from the teeth, and for that I realized the perfect shape for that, it's actually the spade. It could be the heart, but as you can see, the spade here is way pointier. So that works as a good point for the drop to fall from. If you line it up. Something like that. And then I guess you want something on the tongue. I think I just used a circle for this, or maybe this. Again, it's very subtle. It's really hard to place when it's at the edge of something. Something like that. What else? Eyebrows. That's very simple. This one. Mirror it. I just keep it white for the contrast. I mean, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Yeah, I guess we can make the smile even bigger. For that, I think I just added the crescent shape. So I'll go all the way down to the mouth. Click on it. Click X on the color to sample it. Then we have this one. Change the color and squeeze it up there. Mirror it, but that puts it on top, so I'm just gonna press circle and go back in, so I'm set to the top without having to scroll all the way. And then just bring this shape all the way down. Then I'll need to adjust the size of this gradient so it covers, whoops, covers the whole area. Guess I can add a dark gradient on the inside of the mouth. Looks pretty good. I don't like how this looks. That edge is pretty obvious, so I guess I could try. Maybe just stretch it all the way up like this. Yeah, that works. That works. I'm tempted to try to add some more three-dimensionality, but it could be a bit tricky to make it look good, especially with the fucking drool water drop in the way. I was just thinking it could be cool to have the back of the teeth showing. But on the left side it's gonna interfere. It won't really look good if you put them on top of each other, I think. So I guess I should just decide if I want one or the other. Oops. Yeah, I don't know how good this looks. I'm just putting some of these rounded squares on top of each other, trying to line it up. It kind of works, but on the opposite side it's gonna kind of fuck with the thing, so that's the thing. Since you're going to be viewing this from a distance, it's kind of important to keep the aesthetic clean, because you can see it from here, it looks kind of okay, but from here you're like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So you might want to just keep it simple. Kind of looks like shit. I'm also not really fond of this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make it look good. But I guess I've gone through all the important steps. So yeah, that's how to make a funny mask with some proper details on it. There you go. Thanks for watching.